spoke with us for the next 20 minutes. Our speakers are men who have at least 6 months of current abstinence. Everyone except the speaker should mute themselves so we now don't have any background issues. Our speaker tonight is Jerry, and I'm glad you have some pictures to share. I always think that's important. So, first off, thank you, Jerry. So,
this meeting is being recorded.
Hi, my name is Jerry J., and I'm a grateful compulsive overeater. When I first came around OA and people would say they're grateful they were a compulsive overeater, I'd almost throw up. But today I understand where they're coming from because they know it's a disease, not a moral issue. Okay, I'm a relapse survivor. I came into OA in November 1986. I was sent to treatment by the United States Navy for chronic obesity. I was on their weight control program for about 12 years. And that, it's also important for me to say that 5.5 years before they sent me to treatment for OA, they sent me to treatment for AA. And they sent me in Subic Bay in the Philippines just to show that God has a sense of humor. When I got into treatment, it was probably the first time in my life I ever ate 3 meals a day. God was really good and patient with me because I always overate, but I didn't really, the weight didn't stick to me until I was about 27. And then it was just up and down, up and down. So what I've learned in OA is that before OA, the way I used to say, I always beat myself into so here I am at 16, okay, and I stayed pretty much that body size until I was 27. And then this is me after my last relapse in 2001. I was 244 pounds. This is me beating myself into shape. I used to run 10Ks so I could beat my body into shape. And this is me at 256 when the Navy sent me to treatment. Okay, so in treatment, I was really grateful because I met a young man who really described this disease to me. He says, I have a disease that tells me I don't have a disease. And that this time, just a little, and I'll be okay. And the reality is that if I ever had just a little, wouldn't have happened. It's really important for me to remember that when I came in, they used the AA literature. And so, step one, no other kind of bankruptcy is like this one. Food now becomes a rapacious creditor, bleeds us of all self-sufficiency and all will to resist its demands. I'm grateful for my sponsor who had me look up the word rapacious, which means all-consuming, because before OA, if I was awake, that was a reason enough to eat. I didn't really have to have an excuse. I remember my daughter was probably 8 or 9 years old, and she'd always say to me, Dad, why can't you sit down and have a meal with us? You just throw all your food in your face and then you get up and leave. why can't you just sit and have a meal with us? So it's also important for me to remember that I'm really grateful for all the sponsors I've had. I was 5.5 years sober, and I was suicidal because I couldn't meet the Navy's wage standards. And at that time in my life, all I could think about was, at least if I had to, the insanity in my head was about, I need to plan my suicide so it looks like an accident, so then my family will get my life insurance policy, right? What insanity, but I'm glad that God put that insanity in my life, because I couldn't plan a suicide that looked enough like an accident. I'm grateful for that. In OA, my first sponsor, I remember, he asked me, I asked him to sponsor me, and it was out of sheer desperation, because I really didn't want a sponsor in OA, but I had like 90 days of abstinence, and I binge for a few days and get 90 days, and I binge for a few days, and then I get another 90 days. Well, this time when I got the 90 days, I said, well, what do they say to do in program? Go to meetings, call your sponsor. Oh, maybe I ought to get one. So I asked this guy to sponsor me, and he said, are you willing to go to any lengths? And in my mind, I said no, but what came out of my mouth was yes. So then he said,
and a new happiness. We will not.
So then he said, okay, we will have reading and writing assignments the first 30 days. And you need to call your food in every day. So in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, I got to get out of this. I don't want to do that. So I said to him, I got to go to work pretty early in the morning. And he said, that's okay. Call me at 5:30 in the morning. And I thought, man, this guy got to really be sick if I'm calling him at 5:30 in the morning. But I did. And, he walked me through the steps. I got to admit that he told me as soon as I finished step 3, that when I completed my 4th step, that I wouldn't need to call my food in anymore. 2 years later, when I finished my 4th step, I didn't have to call my food in anymore. When it came to doing my 4th step in OA, I just remember a lot of things that came up, a lot of hurts, a lot of things I did that I wasn't really proud of. I blamed everybody else for my problems, okay? What I learned in my 4th step is that my part in it was, if I be honest, my part in it was I was just a spoiled kid and wanted things my way. I'm number 9 of 10 children. I have 5 older sisters. 2 of them are still living, and 3 older brothers and 1 younger brother. So I'm number 9 of 10. But I was the baby for like 7.5 years, so I really got spoiled. And I just thought that the world should cater to me. Well, what I learned in my 4th step is that I was very demanding of other people, and I expected them to love me, but I didn't love myself. I didn't know how. I remember when I first came around meetings early in my recovery, it was all about, wow, poor Jerry, nobody loves me. But the reality is I was married and I had 2 children. And I know my wife loved me because she's still with me today. And we've been together 46 years of marriage. And that I know my children loved me, but when I came to OA, I didn't love myself enough so I could accept their love. And that's what doing the steps taught me. The other thing was when I said to my sponsor, I have a problem with God. I can't deal with God. And he said, well, that's okay. I'll give you a God you can do business with. Good order and discipline. And I thought, oh, I'm a military guy. I could do that. But as I walked through the steps with him and we finished the third step, I found a God that was bigger and greater than anything in my life and that loved me and was always there for me. And I could see that God always was there for me, okay? I ended up going to Vietnam because I wanted to avoid being punished for being late to work all the time. So I had to volunteer to go there, and God got me through that, okay? I'm just really grateful for that. But until I got into OA and found a God I could do business with, I was just really an ungrateful, sniveling little child. And I want to say to anybody who's new, what they said to me when I first got here was, welcome to OA, welcome to a new way of life. Now hold on, because you're in for the ride of your life. My experience with OA is that it just got better, okay? My life got better. I have a loving relationship with my daughter today, and that's thanks to OA. Because when she turned 13, I shared at a meeting, now that my daughter's turning into a woman, I can't have anything to do with her. And before I got out the door of the meeting, this lady grabbed me by the arm and she said, this is the time your daughter needs you to be in her life. You need to be there for her. And I thought, wow, I get permission to be in my daughter's life. And I'm really grateful for that because we have a very loving relationship today. Early in my recovery, I was also on Hospital and Institutions Committee. And at that time, the chair said, everybody has to have a brown book of Overeaters Anonymous. And so I said, does that mean I got to read it too? And she said, yes, Jerry, you have to read it. But I'm really grateful that that was the case because in the original, it's Appendix A. In the new edition, it's Appendix B. But it talks about a disease of the mind. And this really helped me. The remarkable thing about OA success is that the program gets people to function far better than they ever have in their lives. With any other disease, you're lucky to get back to where you were. If you had a heart attack, for example, you're fortunate enough to get your heart function as well as it did before the attack. With compulsive overeaters, though, not only do you get back to a normal weight, but more importantly, your life has changed, and in a sense, you're ahead of where you were before you became a compulsive overeater. You now have the tools of feeling, touching, caring, loving, sharing, being honest with your family, and looking at life in an understanding way. Not fighting it, but going along with it. Once you treat the illness, you have the potential for a more together person than you were. Therefore, it's exciting for physicians and others who have been ignoring the problem or expressing deep pessimism about it to think of compulsive overeating as a disease and to realize it can be treated so successfully. It's really important for me to remember that today I have a list of alcoholic foods, and those are the ones I abstain from. And that I'm really grateful that, like early in my recovery, we used to have a 24-hour line you could call anytime. And I, because I am who I am, I was on duty, but I could do it from home. But I had a part-time job as a security guard, so I went to my part-time job. 3:00 in the morning came, and I thought, oh man, if they catch me, I'm going to get busted, and my life will be over. So I picked up the phone, and I called this 24-hour line, and I said, my life as I know it has ended. And the lady at the other end of the phone said, let's pray. What a concept, right? And then once again, God took care of me. They didn't find out that I was breaking the rules again. Also wanted to mention that I was really grateful for Bill's story, because I was reminded that my friend promised me when these things were done, I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator, that I'd have all the elements of a way of living which answered all my problems. Belief in the power of God, plus enough willingness, honesty, and humility to establish and maintain the new order of things were the essential requirements. Simple but not easy. A price had to be paid. It meant destruction of self-centeredness. I must turn in all things to the Father of light who presides over us all. So once again, I was reminded that I had to surrender my selfishness. And I'm really grateful that after I gave my sponsor my fourth step in Balboa Park in a July afternoon, he stood up, I stood up, he gave me a big hug. And the first thing I thought about was not the most macho thing I could be doing today, but the second thing I thought about was I just told him all my garbage, and he loved me anyway. And then he said, okay, now we can start on 6 and 7. And because it was a Saturday, I said to him, man, you mean I don't get the weekend off? And he said, does your disease ever take the weekend off? Anyway, and then the other thing is step 7 really helped me to understand that I needed to change the way I did things. The chief activator of our defects has been self-centered fear, primarily fear that we would lose something we already possessed, or we would fail to get something we demanded. Living upon a basis of unsatisfied needs, we were in a state of continual disturbance and frustration. Therefore, no peace was to be had unless we could find a means of reducing these demands. The difference between a demand and a simple request is plain to anyone. And what I learned is that I was always demanding things of people, and they never would respond. But if I would do a simple request, like if I would say, dear, would you please do this? People would do it. But if I said do it, they'd look at me like, have you lost your mind? I remember my kids used to tell me, we're not one of those sailors that work for you, Dad. Anyway, just so grateful for the steps, for my sponsor, for OA. And my abstinence date is June 16, 2001. And that's after I came back. Now, what got me back was I go to the other program too, and, I lied to myself about, well, it's a little more than a meal, but it's only a meal and a quarter. It's only a meal and a half. It's a meal and 99 100ths, right? Well, when you eat with reckless abandon, even if it's 3 meals a day, you gain weight. And that got me back up to 244 pounds. But one of my friends in the other program said to me, Jerry, I don't know what you've been doing, but man, you sure got fat. And tears came out of my eyes, and I could no longer be in denial. And so
1 minute.
That's when I got a new sponsor and started working the steps again. And there was a lady in program, she always used to have this one saying that I really incorporated. She used to say, it's better to do anything at all than it is to break your abstinence. Even run naked in the street. And I thought to myself, you ain't gonna catch me running naked in the street. So I need to give that much strength and energy to my abstinence. And I'll close with, on January 19th in the For Today book, I learned that it's a saying that, for today I'll let no one, including myself, make me feel shame, or I will let no one, including myself, try to shame me into changing something about myself I were different. I pray to be relieved of the shame, guilt, and self-hate, and to accept and like myself exactly as I am. And that's where I can begin to change. And I just thank you guys for inviting me. And once again, it's a disease, not a moral issue, and that the military, the Navy, now discharges people for not making the weight standards because they believe it's a moral issue now. So thank you for letting me share. Keep coming back. And remember, if you have any problems, just call Dave C. and tell him Jerry said to call.
The recording has stopped.
Okay.